Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Cut. Literally, Buzz, quit bouncing around like that. Why are you doing that? And Neil, that is not the line. It is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Get it right. Look, we're making history, you guys. We don't have time or any sort of wiggle room for screw-ups. Now, everybody back into positions. Let's run it again. Oh, sup, sobers. By April of 1961, the Soviet Union had successfully put up the very first satellite, Sputnik. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. You may not have heard of Sputnik 2. And little fun fact for you guys, it was carrying a cute little dog named Laika, and it was the first animal living organism put into space. Not so fun fact, Laika did not survive more than 2 hours from overheating and just lack of preparation. They didn't have any re-entry plans, so, it was a suicide mission. Obviously, she was not expected to survive. But the weirdest part to me was that the Soviet Union told the public that she survived for a few more days before they euthanized her with poisoned food. And I was like, how is that better? Like, why spread that story instead of Laika was a monumental Soviet Union hero that will live in infamy as a space explorer? But Laika's story does prove that a stray mangy mutt from the streets can rise to infamy, be something truly monumental, so much that there's still statues dedicated to Laika in the Soviet Union, Russia, today. Then on April 12th of 1961, the Soviet Union sent Yuri Gagarin into space. He became the first human to orbit the Earth on the Vostok 1. Alternatively, compare that to the US, who had only gotten up Explorer 1, their very first satellite, by 1958. That was it. On May 5th of 1961, the U.S. would answer back by sending Alan Shepard on the first manned suborbital flight. This would put the Americans back in the race, but still trailing behind because we haven't orbited the Earth yet. And like we discussed in great detail last week during my JFK episode, we were entrenched in the Cold War. This was a war between two superpowers, two ideologies, and they certainly didn't want them beating the U.S. at anything, especially the space race. But the U.S. was definitely getting desperate. They needed to do something, or they were going to lose this race. And if they were going to say that capitalism is better than communism, that a republic system is better than the communist system, then they can't let them win anything. They can't let them beat us at anything, because that could sway people into thinking that communism is a better system. Which is probably why JFK addressed Congress on May 25th of 1961, asking them for more money to spend on the space program so that we could send a dude to the moon.
Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
He would bolden this initiative and these claims on September 12th of 1962 during a speech that he gave to Rice University, where he famously said,
"The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Why would Kennedy promise this when our space program was in its infancy? We had barely even gotten people into space, and now we're going to be landing them on the moon within the decade? Okay, well, we wouldn't find out at the time, but in 1963, during a taped conversation between JFK and James Webb, he would very explicitly state that
everything that we do ought to really be tied into getting onto the moon and ahead of the Russians.
Why can't it be tied to preeminence in space, which are your own words?
Because, by God, we've been telling everybody we're preeminent in space. For 5 years, nobody believes it because they have the booster and the satellite. But I do think we ought to get it, really clear that the policy ought to be that this is the top priority program of the agency and one of the two, except for defense, the top priority of the United States government. I think that that's the position we ought to take. Now, this may not change anything about that schedule, but at least we ought to be clear. Otherwise, we shouldn't be spending this kind of money because I'm not that interested in space. I think it's good. I think we ought to know about it. We're ready to spend reasonable amounts of money, but we're talking about these fantastic expenditures which wreck our budget and all these other domestic programs. And the only justification for it, in my opinion, to do it is because we hope to beat them and demonstrate that starting behind as we did by a couple of years, by God, we passed them.
Number one, there are real unknowns as to whether man can live under the weightless condition and you'll ever make the lunar landing. This is one kind of political vulnerability I'd like to avoid such a flat commitment to.
We don't know a damn thing about the surface of the moon, and we're making the wildest guesses about how we're going to land on the moon. And we could get a terrible disaster from putting something down on the surface of the moon that's very different than we think it is. Now, the other thing is, I would certainly not favor spending $6 to $7 billion to find out about space. Why are we spending $7 million in getting fresh water from salt water when we're spending $7 billion to find out about space? But so obviously you wouldn't put it on that priority except for the defense implications. And the second point is the fact that the Soviet Union has made this a test of the system.
So he didn't even really care about going to space. He only cared about beating the Soviets in the space race, as well as in the Cold War in general. Congress agreed with the president that this was a worthwhile endeavor, and they agreed to dump extra money into the federal budget allocations for the NASA space program. Their budget literally doubled that year. So with the extra funding, and like we talked about last week and many weeks prior, Operation Paperclip suddenly employed tons of different Nazi scientists working on different programs in the US. There was a couple of Nazi scientists who specialized in developing the V-2 rocket missile, which naturally killed many American soldiers, but they were brought in to work on our US space program. A couple of those names would be Werner von Braun, who was hired as the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, and Kurt H. Debus, the director of the Kennedy Space Center. Just as a quick reminder, these guys were former, probably still, Nazis. As many of you guys are aware, during the 1960s, there was a cultural revolution where people were suddenly opening their eyes and realizing that the wars we were fighting were basically pointless, and they were starting to oppose these wars. The whole hippie movement was spreading, peace, love, tune in and drop out. The whole era of the 60s was focused on really reformatting what was important to us. And naturally, the space program is going to come into question because when there's tons of programs and people who are struggling and starving and dying in our own country, at home, on Earth, on the ground, it seems ridiculous to double our spending on space exploration just so we can have bragging rights over the Soviet Union. From 1958 all the way through this year, using 2024 inflated dollar values, the NASA program has cost us $1.8 trillion, which certainly seems like quite a bit. The Apollo program alone, in 2024 dollars, cost about $250 billion, which is why a lot of people think that it was a huge waste of money. But let's go ahead and compare that to numerous other huge wastes of money that actually make this look like chump change in comparison. World War I cost us $750 billion, which makes sense. I mean, pretty big war. Lots of money went into that war. World War II cost us $5.2 trillion. Massive jump. The Manhattan Project, creating the atomic bombs and nuclear weapons, cost $35 billion by itself. The Korean War cost $1.1 trillion. And the Korean War did not last, 70 years, 80 years? Shortly after that, we got involved in the Vietnam War, which cost us $1.3 trillion. If we fast forward just a little bit, looking at a more current situation, and these are all in inflated 2024 dollar values, the war on terror cost us $8.5 trillion. And what was the entire war on terror about, according to the Bush administration?
Osama bin Laden and other terrorists are still in hiding. Our message to them is clear. No matter how long it takes, America will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
That's right. Fighting terrorism and catching Osama bin Laden, taking out Saddam Hussein because he had weapons of mass destruction, allegedly. But this is the one that really shocked me, you guys. It cost us $3.3 trillion to hunt down Osama bin Laden. That's nearly double the entirety of the NASA program starting in 1958. So we spent more money trying to capture and kill Osama bin Laden than it took for us to invent the Saturn V rocket, the lunar module, and put 12 guys on the moon. And then once we found Osama bin Laden, it cost us another $25 million for the operation to take him out. And this is all keeping in mind, like the short that I posted recently, that Osama bin Laden was being held by the U.S. and U.S. allies at a compound waiting for U.S. officials to decide that they wanted to come and take him out and claim their trophy kill. So what's with all this $3.3 trillion? Where did this money go? We didn't need to hunt for him. Fishy. And according to whistleblower Alan Perot, they didn't even take out Osama bin Laden. It cost us $25 million to take out his body double because Iran had pulled him out of the compound at the very last second. And then they were using it as blackmail, because what's more important than blackmailing the U.S. to be able to get what you want from this major superpower who can easily dominate you? So in the government's defense, we have spent way more money for way, way less than the NASA space program. After 8 years of hard work and dedication, the NASA space program finally paid off. And in July of 1969, with America's very first trial run sending humans through the Van Allen belts into outer space, they were successful with the Apollo 11 mission, landing humans on the moon.
No way! That's great!
In fact, this first trial run was not their only success. There would be 6 out of the 7 Apollo missions where we would successfully land men on the moon. And not only that, they'd come back to Earth too. But this is just a quick little fun fact for you guys out there that are like me and didn't realize this. Me and Kim were talking one night and she's like, oh yeah, moon landing's definitely fake. And I was like, no, there's a chance it's not. Like, we've gone to the moon multiple times since 1969. And she's like, no, we haven't. And I was like, yeah, we have. We've been to the moon tons of times. And then I looked it up, and we have only actually been to the moon 6 times between 1969 and 1972. That to me was a little weird. And when you take into account all of the controversy and all of the things that the government was caught lying to the American people about, the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the entire situation with JFK, Project Monarch, and MK Ultra, Operation Northwoods, where the CIA was planning terrorist acts against American citizens that they were going to blame on Cuba so that we would then want to go to war with Cuba to then eliminate Fidel Castro. Sounds like a pretty familiar playbook, right? And if you don't think it is, then watch my American Propaganda Machine video about 9/11, because, well, it'll explain it all to you. And then Nixon, the very same president who was responsible for putting us on the moon, also involved in the Watergate scandal. People were just losing complete faith in the government and what they were telling us. They were starting to question things that they were being told and wondering, what's the truth? And like we heard before, Kennedy himself, who initiated this entire operation, didn't even really care about exploring space. He just wanted to win the space race. He wanted to defeat the Soviets and make America the ultimate superpower. And since scientists claim that we still haven't figured out how to get through the Van Allen belts.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
And that's not even mentioning Operation Fishbowl, where we launched 5 nuclear missiles into the Van Allen belts, seeing if it would have any effect on them, but it didn't, other than increasing the amount of radiation and toxic chemicals in the Van Allen belts. And this all happened in 1962. 8 years later, we're sending guys right through there.
Checkmate exhibited a moderate aurora seen in both the northern and southern conjugate areas. Kingfish's fireball was well defined and its aurora moderate. Radar clutter is caused by ionized air, ionized bomb debris, and electrons trapped in the magnetic field. All these materials reflect radar energy, giving rise to false targets on the radar scope. Another problem is presented by field-aligned clutter, observed in that region of the sky for which the observer is at right angles to the magnetic field lines at E-layer heights, and within an azimuth of about 15 degrees to either side of magnetic north. After the detonation, usable frequencies tended to be higher than pre-burst values. Almost all conditions had returned to normal by H+2 hours, except on starfish, where effects were detectable Pacific-wide for 2 days. Kingfish altered propagation conditions on paths within 2,500 kilometers of the burst point, as well as throughout the southern conjugate area for several hours. The optical measurements documented the spatial, temporal, and spectral characteristics of UV optical infrared effects associated with the detonations in the burst area, as well as the southern conjugate region.
And it would take multiple refuelings for us to make it back to the moon. And current moon programs are taking 10 plus years and have experienced multiple delays in trying to make it back. And we haven't even been back to deep space, let alone the moon, since 1972. It certainly begs the question for a lot of people. Did we actually land on the moon?
Let's go. Alcohol.
Action! All right, welcome back to Sobering Stories with me, your truth-seeking, sober homie, DJ Petrovsky. If this is your first time here, thanks for checking things out. Hopefully you'll return. If you like this episode, go check out my other ones. They're all just as good, some of them better, I don't know. If you are a returning subscriber, sup sobers, please don't forget to hit the like button. Definitely subscribe or make sure you're still subscribed. And please hit the notification bell. It really helps me when you guys watch my videos when they first get posted, because YouTube will run like a quick check to see how many of your subscribers watch your video, and based on how well it does within your subscriber base, that's how YouTube decides whether or not to push it far out into the algorithm.
Far out.
So every view, every like, every subscription, it all definitely counts, and I really, 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 truly fucking appreciate it. So thank you guys, seriously. This channel is nothing without you guys. We do have a quick sponsor this week, and this week's sponsor has really done so much to highlight the gravity of the topics we discuss here on the channel, as well as really pull this channel to the next level. And the sponsor this week is going to be the moon. Much like many of you, I have a pretty special relationship with the moon. I love seeing it. I love solar and lunar eclipses. I love full moons. I am heavily affected by full moon energy. Just generally, I feel so much happier looking into the sky and seeing that there's something there. I feel like it'd be so bland and dull if we didn't have our little homie, the moon, traveling with us through space. So I don't know, I'm really grateful to the moon, and this story today would not be possible were it not for the moon. So thanks to the moon for sponsoring this video today. Right now, as a special offer, all of my sobers who click the link in the description will get free access to a picture of the moon. Follow that link and grab yourself that picture of the moon. Last week, like I mentioned, we discussed JFK. Before that, we talked about Marilyn Monroe. Before that, we talked about Anna Nicole Smith. It just seems like we keep getting deeper and deeper each and every week. But things have gotten real dark the last couple of weeks, at least in my opinion, especially the JFK thing. That was just so much darkness. So I wanted to talk about something that was a little bit more, I don't know if I'd say positive, but just a little bit more exciting and light than what we've been talking about the last few weeks. And it very directly relates to the JFK story. The thing that I find the most fascinating about the moon landing and the fact that it may or may not have happened is that it is so, I don't know, it's so divided. In fact, even polls online show that there's probably like a pretty even split between people who believe we did land on the moon and didn't land on the moon. And that's because there's so many weird anomalies that make you question, like, nah, that's for sure fake. But then you hear testimony from astronauts who were actually there, who actually stepped foot on the moon. You see video, you see photos, you see moon rocks. There's all kinds of actual evidence to say that we did go. So you're like, oh, well, yeah, we probably did go. So it's this constant back and forth, this constant wondering of, did we actually go to the freaking moon or not, dude? I couldn't have planned this better myself if I actually knew that this was happening. But Danny Jones, he's got a phenomenal podcast. The last time I really used any of his videos in my podcast was talking about the Garth Brooks situation. But Danny Jones had an amazing podcast. It's 4 hours long, but it is a debate between Bart Sibrel and the Apollo 16 astronaut Charles Duke, who allegedly did in fact walk on the moon. Now, this debate was, like one comment said in there, like the Super Bowl for me. So exciting to watch Bart Sibrel, who's dedicated his entire life to proving the moon landing hoax, and an actual astronaut who claims to have walked on the moon and says that he has definitive proof from bringing moon rocks back, video footage, just his overall experience in general. So it was really interesting to see these two guys go head to head. I will say, however, I was a little disappointed because, I don't know, Charles Duke, obviously he's definitely old, but I didn't expect him to be so absent unless that was a part of the whole ploy. I mean, shoot, for all we know, these astronauts could have been a part of the MK Ultra program, so they have no idea what they experienced. They were dosed with acid and then put into a simulator and they thought they went to space. Who knows? They were testing all kinds of weird stuff then. He definitely seemed like he was just regurgitating the same answers over and over. But in his defense, he is like, what? You actually believe that I didn't walk on the moon? Like, I definitely did. So I don't even understand what the question is here. Like, you can believe all you want that we didn't, but I know for a 100% fact that we did.
Well, then
you don't
I guess
believe,
this guy
you don't believe we landed on the moon.
You didn't know that before you got here?
No,
yeah, no. His life's
so
work.
how did we get 600 pounds of moon rocks?
Well, like I
Let's
said,
talk about the moon rock. Okay, let's put a pin there. Now let's talk about the moon rocks.
And that's kind of the attitude you'd expect somebody who did actually walk on the moon to take. Someone who didn't walk on the moon might spend hours trying to argue you and defend their position and get really upset and defensive, which is going to indicate that they are just trying really hard to make you believe they did. It's not like they're strong and confident in their own truth. Anyways, that's just a little bit of my take from it. There's a lot of information in the debate. A lot of it we'll talk about today, actually. But it is a really good debate. If you want to go watch it, I'll link it in the description as well, right next to that free moon photo. Before we get started, I want to make it abundantly clear that I am in no way skilled in astrophysics, physics, space, literally anything having to do with math. So don't hold it against me. I'm just approaching this from a dude with a computer standpoint, okay? With that in mind, I do find it very interesting that the tilt of the Earth on its axis is a 23.4 degree tilt. Now, if you guys know anything about angles, you know that they all have to add up to 90 degrees if it's a right angle. And in this case, that would leave 66.6 degrees on the other side of the tilt of the Earth. Another little fun fact for you is that the Earth rotates around the sun at 66,600 miles per hour. That's a little ominous, don't you think? There's a real good chance it doesn't mean anything at all. But what if it means something? This adorable little satellite is 237,000 miles away from the Earth. And for my non-American viewers, that's 384,400 kilometers. And it takes the moon roughly 29.5 days to go through its full moon cycle and orbit the Earth. The moon's obviously a very desolate place, covered in craters, but there's these really, really dark spots on the moon. They're called mares. It's essentially a plain of basalt that's caused by volcanic activity. It causes more of a flat, less mountainous, and obviously darker area of the moon. Each of these dark spots is given different names, and the Pacific area that the Apollo 11 mission was focused on is called the Sea of Tranquility. They chose this region because it was guaranteed to be flat, smooth, and it wasn't going to give any sort of weird elevation readings to the spacecraft as they tried to descend. One of the other reasons they chose this spot is because in 1967, they had sent a moon rover that actually landed on the moon and took tons of photographs, sending all those photographs back to Houston.
Development of a new terminal descent sequence normally takes 4 to 6 weeks. For Surveyor 5, it was accomplished in 40 hours, ending when the spacecraft touched down on the moon on September 10, approximately 18 miles northwest of its original target site in the Sea of Tranquility. The first lunar chemistry set is shown in this picture, ready to do its job of analyzing the composition of the lunar soil. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, work continued on the mosaic, showing details of each of the Surveyor landing sites. In all, Surveyor 5 sent more than 18,000 pictures during the first lunar day and transmitted a total of 86 hours of alpha scattering data. Perhaps the most eagerly awaited of the Surveyor 5 results were those from the alpha scattering instrument, which provided the first direct measurements of the chemical composition of an extraterrestrial body.
So we already had a pretty good idea of what was there, and we had tons of photographs of this very spot. On July 16th, 1969, 3 brave souls strapped themselves in to the Apollo 11 command module, which was nestled nice and neat right inside of the Saturn V rocket. Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong would be venturing off outside of this world and would be the first men to attempt to step foot on the lunar surface. At 9:32 a.m., the Apollo 11 crew launches from pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Station. Everything seems to go just fine, no issues. It takes them about 3 hours to make it all the way through the Van Allen belts and into deep space. This is where they would hit their translunar injection stage. This is when the spacecraft actually enters its path on the way to the moon. From here, it's a 3-day journey before they can enter into lunar orbit, at which point the ship, which would be the command module and the lunar module, they both orbit the moon for about a day. After this, they decide that they're actually going to make their descent down to the lunar surface. And this is when Michael Collins stays back inside of the command module. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong go into the lunar module, and they begin to separate the two. And the lunar module is going to be the one that actually descends down to the lunar surface, while Michael Collins kind of just lingers in lunar orbit, waiting for them to finish their mission and then come back and reattach to the command module. Just before 2 p.m. on July 20th, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would begin their descent from 50,000 feet above the lunar surface. While undocking from the actual command module, there was some sort of like, I don't know, unvented pressure boost that pushed the lunar module a little bit too far off, causing a huge trajectory malfunction, and they ended up being 4 miles over their target. So Neil was trying really hard to find a good spot for them to actually land on since they were way off target. And since he had gone so far past, he was having to slow the lunar module way down by angling it the opposite way of where the module was going. Everything with these missions is so precise, there's not a whole lot of margin for error. So having this much of an error with 4 miles over their intended target, they started running extremely low on fuel. They got so desperate that they had about 30 seconds of fuel remaining, and they were counting it down in Houston, letting Neil know, like, yo, it's almost getting to the point where you're going to have to abort the entire mission. 20 feet away from the surface of the moon, you're going to have to completely abort so we can come back because you're almost out of fuel. But then that's when we hear Neil Armstrong say,
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
It's called Tranquility Base because they landed on the Sea of Tranquility, the volcanic basalt little, dark spot. 6 hours after landing, Neil Armstrong would make his way down the ladder. He would make his first step onto the lunar surface, and he would obviously say the famous words,
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This moment, watching Neil Armstrong touch down for the first time on the moon, was witnessed live by 650 million people around the globe. It was fed from a camera that was located on the outside of the ship. It had a direct live feed back to Houston, where that was then decoded and reprogrammed so that it could be sent out on national television. And then 19 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin would make his way down onto the surface of the moon, and the two of them would get to work. These two dudes would spend 2 hours and 31 minutes examining, photographing, and just, doing different science experiments, setting up different scientific packages, and collecting 47.5 pounds, or 21.5 kilograms, of dirt and rock samples to bring back to the Earth. And these are some of the proofs that we did in fact land on the moon. First, we've got the laser reflectors that they placed at the site they landed, and this allows Earth to send these lasers to hit these reflectors. They bounce back to Earth, and based on the time that it takes for it to transfer, they're able to determine how far away the moon is and what lunar cycle it is, all these different things.
Buzz, quit jumping around and like you're doing and get to work.
Part of the Apollo 11 mission, beyond getting a human to the moon and back, was to bring back soil and rocks and conduct some of these scientific experiments.
Buzz Aldrin coming into view on the right, carrying the 2 experiments.
The world watched as Buzz Aldrin set up that reflector. It included a sundial and a level bubble to be positioned correctly, and that allowed scientists on the ground at observatories to fire a laser at the moon, hit the reflector, and a couple of minutes later, the light returns. Those reflectors helping create measurements which have revealed secrets about the moon and the galaxy beyond.
Of course, they had to stop for a quick chat with President Nixon.
Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over. That would be an honor. Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you do. For every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure they too join with America in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. And as you talk to us from the Sea of Tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to Earth. for one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to earth.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here representing not only the United States, but men of peace of all nations, and with interest and a curiosity and with the vision for the future.
And thank you very much, and I look forward, all of us look forward to seeing you on the Hornet on Thursday. Look forward to that very much, sir.
The other thing they left was a solar-powered seismometer, which was left there to measure moonquakes and just different seismic activity on the moon, which definitely is very interesting. And the seismometer is one of the ways that they say they proved the moon landing, because the seismic activity on the readings of this seismometer, they align perfectly with their departure off the moon, as well as their movements while they were actually walking around after they placed this seismometer. This device only lasted 21 days though, and then it stopped working permanently.
The astronauts in Apollo 12 left seismometers. They wanted to see if the moon had these quaking type behaviors called moonquakes. And these are things that you can learn about only from placing these seismometers on the moon's surface.
The Apollo astronauts and the scientists at NASA came up with a really interesting experiment, which was to crash things into the moon and measure their impact with seismometers. When Apollo 12 sent its lunar module ascent stage hurtling into the moon, the signal seemed to be going back and forth inside the moon, almost like it was a bell that was ringing. And it went on for an hour, and no one has been able to understand why.
This entire mission was riddled with things that had to go perfectly for this whole mission to go according to plan. But I'd say that the most challenging and intricate part of the process would be the reascent from the lunar surface back to the command module so that they could engage in their trip back home. Now, in order to do this, they had to ascend from this craft, which had to separate from its actual landing module of that craft. In order to do that, they had these crazy explosive like mounts, so they would blow while simultaneously releasing this hypergolic fuel, which is basically two different fuels that basically ignite and combust as soon as they come into contact with each other. And this all had to happen at the exact same time. Even crazier, there was no backup. So if this didn't work on the first try, these guys were totally screwed. From there, they would have to ascend at 3,800 miles per hour from the lunar surface up into lunar orbit. They would have to rendezvous with the command module, and then they would have to get their probe on the end of the ascent module to fit into this cone on the command module. And apparently the clips and ways that it would lock in were like the size of your fingernail. Now they're doing this all at 3,800 miles per hour orbiting around the moon, and they have to be able to find the perfect trajectory to get them in line with the command module's orbit around the moon. So it seems pretty intricate and difficult, and they are manually maneuvering these craft, both the command module and the ascent module, while wearing these giant spacesuits. I don't know. And keep in mind, this is the very first time they are using this technology. They had tested it on Earth, but they had only tried it for 330 seconds, and the craft has to be able to withstand 3,800 miles per hour for 550 seconds so that it can make it up into lunar orbit. They put a lot of faith on this technology, especially considering that this is what happened when Neil Armstrong was testing the lunar lander 11 days prior to launch. And yet days later, this same guy allegedly performed some miracle maneuvers, landing on the surface of the moon with just seconds of fuel left in a totally foreign environment. Okay, sure. They began their ascent just before 2 p.m. on the 21st of July, and they didn't officially dock with the command station until about, 5:30 p.m. Just after midnight, they would exit the lunar orbit and begin their trans-Earth injection. They would make their way back into Earth's atmosphere, where the command module would leave behind the service module, leaving just the little pointy cone-shaped thing that we see. Conveniently, there was a complete communication blackout during this 9-minute descent to Earth. A very important 9 minutes for people to see, but a very hard 9 minutes to fake if you were going to. Just saying. And they would fall through the atmosphere, through the orbit, back through the Van Allen belts. Eventually, their parachutes would deploy, and they would fall all the way down 950 miles southwest of Hawaii into the Pacific Ocean. They would get picked up by the USS Hornet, and they would have to go into a brief quarantine period just in case they brought back like space aids or something, I don't know. Having returned back to Earth on July 24th, they had a little bit of time to obviously be quarantined, rest and recoup, get back to their normal homeostasis. And then on August 12th, nearly a month later, they held a press conference just to discuss just this amazing feat, this monumental moment in human history. And this is one of the first things that strikes many people as being very strange. These guys during this press conference do not seem stoked like I would be if I just made a successful mission to the moon and back, and I'm still alive to tell the tale. These guys seem like they're being held hostage, or they're almost like guilty or shameful or regretful for something. But what?
I'm struck from the movies and the still pictures by the difference in the very hostile appearance of the moon when you're orbiting over it or some distance from it, and the warmer colors and the apparently relatively more friendly appearance of it when you're on the surface. I'd like to ask Colonel Collins if he gets that same impression from the pictures, and the two of you who were on the moon, what impression you have along those lines.
Well, the moon changes character as the angle of sunlight striking its surface changes. At very low sun angles, close to the terminator, or dawn or at dusk, it has the harsh, forbidding characteristics which you see in a lot of the photographs. On the other hand, when the sun is more closely overhead, a midday situation, the moon takes on more of a brown color, it becomes almost a rosy-looking place, a fairly friendly place. So that from dawn through midday through dusk, you run the whole gamut of it. It starts off very forbidding, becomes friendly, and then becomes forbidding again as the sun disappears.
Neil, were you and Buzz, did you have the feeling you were getting a little low on fuel during the landing? Were you concerned at that point about being low on fuel? And the second part of it, I suppose, for Buzz is, out of your experience, how tough do you think pinpoint precision landings will be on the lunar surface on future flights?
Okay, yes, we were concerned about running low on fuel and the range extension of the landing area that you found yourself in. However, we spent more time in the manual phase than we would have planned in order to find a suitable landing area.
Would each of you give us your estimate of what is the meaning of this to all of us?
You want to try that? After you.
Well, I believe that what this country set out to do was something that was going to be done sooner or later, whether we set a specific goal or not. I believe that from the early space flights, we demonstrated a potential to carry out this type of a mission. And again, it was a question of time until this would be accomplished. I think the relative ease with which we were able to carry out our mission, which of course came after a very efficient and a logical sequence of flights, I think that this demonstrated that we were certainly on the right track when we took this commitment to go to the moon. I think that what this means is that many other problems perhaps can be solved in the same way by taking a commitment to solve them in a long time fashion. I think that we were timely in accepting this mission of going to the moon. It might be timely at this point to think in many other areas of other missions that could be accomplished.
Well, everybody looking at me?
They would send 6 more Apollo missions back to the moon. 5 of them would be perfectly successful, just like Apollo 11. The only one that wasn't successful is likely the one that you've heard about, maybe even seen the movie, Apollo 13. I'm not 100% sure of the specifics of what exactly happened to their space shuttle on the way out, but something happened, and they were at the point where they were lucky just to be able to make it back to Earth, because they had lost so much power, so many different engines, and they were basically just floating way off course.
And it's rather odd to see it floating like this in Odyssey while it's playing the theme from 2001. In Odyssey while it's playing the theme from 2001. The theme from 2001.
April 13th, 1970. The mood could only be described as relaxed. Apollo 13, man's 5th lunar mission. The 3rd scheduled to land on the moon, continued its tranquil coast.
This is the crew of Apollo 13, wishing everybody there a nice evening, and we're just about ready to close out our inspection of Aquarius and get back to a pleasant evening in Odyssey. Good night.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Yes, Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
And we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there. And as I recall, main B was the one that had a amp spike on it once before.
What they ended up having to do, if I remember correctly, is utilizing the lunar orbit to make a giant loop around the moon and then have that same trajectory and momentum throw them back out into their trans-Earth injection. One of the main questions I had digging into all of this was, if we proved ourselves and we made it to the moon first, that was our entire goal, we didn't really care about space exploration, why didn't we just stop after Apollo 11? Why did we keep going back to the moon? Why did we go back to the moon 6 times in a total of, 3 years? One of the first reasons I thought of was, well, maybe there was competition. Maybe there was other nations that were about to make it to the moon like we did, and we needed to assert our dominance. We didn't just go once. We made it multiple times. We can do it regularly. But no, to this day, America is still the only nation to have put a man or woman on the moon. What seems to be the real answer is the fact that it was a moneymaker. It created hundreds of thousands of jobs. It brought in tons of investments from the government, private investors. All kinds of money was coming into this program. And the technological advancements that were coming out of this program, out of just space exploration in general, were having a return of investment like 7 to 8 times what they were putting into it. So it was extremely profitable for them to keep running these space missions. But after we landed Apollo 11 on the moon, it was kind of like, woohoo, cool, we did it. Okay, cool, that was fun, now it's over, let's move on. So Apollo 12 did not get the same kind of recognition that the others did. They didn't make a phone call with the president like Apollo 11 did. So that's why they say that Apollo 13 had this extremely dramatic situation. Because what sells better than nationalized drama? In order to keep running this space program, they needed the public support. They needed people behind this program, so it didn't just seem like they were running it against their will. And getting people invested emotionally, what a great way to get people invested back in the space program. Bring our astronauts home. What struck me as really interesting about these Apollo missions is that out of the 7 manned Apollo missions, 6 of them went perfectly. Of course, they had little hang-ups and hiccups here and there, but nothing dramatic, no failures. Apollo 13 was the only technical failure, But even those guys made it to the moon, around it, and all the way back to Earth. The only thing that went wrong with each and every single Apollo mission is that there was information missing once the mission ended. Every single one. On Apollo 11, all of the telemetry data disappeared. The very first original high-quality slow-scan TV tapes that showed Neil touching down on the surface for the first time, those all disappeared for a number of years. It turns out that they were sent to Sydney, Australia, and were taped over. Think about that for a second. The most monumental moment in human history was taped over like a bad soap opera. Then the 16mm data acquisition camera that was on the outside of the ascent module, which was the one that filmed them ascending from the lunar surface, that camera disappeared for many, many years. It didn't turn up until the early 2000s at an auction in Sydney, Australia. On Apollo 12, one of the astronauts accidentally pointed the color film camera directly at the sun, which immediately ruined all of the film and the camera because of the intense radiation. There's no atmosphere to block any of the sun rays.
Okay, Houston, I'm going to move the TV camera now. Roger, Al. Hey, it's real nice moving around out there. You don't seem to get tired. You really hop like a bunny. Where is Earth? There it is. There's the TV. And, let me see here. Going towards the sun, that's bad. Over here a minute. Don't get panicked.
And man, timing is everything, right? It goes out as we're about to look at the Earth from the moon. And they also had this really weird situation where the Surveyor 3 camera returned to Earth and it was contaminated with terrestrial streptococcus virus, which is an Earth thing. Kind of weird. On Apollo 14, there was 35 minutes of blackout during their descent to the lunar surface. That's been completely unexplained. And also, while on the surface of the moon, Alan Shepard did these golf swings, hitting a golf ball off the moon, I guess, which sounds sick, but the footage of that happening disappeared from the vault. Apparently, this footage we do have is from a recording of the live broadcast. With Apollo 15, they found this rock called the Great Scott Rock, or also called the Seatbelt Basalt, because the guy said that he had to fix his seatbelt when really he went and grabbed a rock off the lunar surface. And this rock sat for 40 years as a pristine lunar specimen. But in 2009, they tested it and found that it was just basic Earth rock orbit. But when they descended down to the surface, they didn't find this boulder anywhere. The other thing that happened on Apollo 16 is their UV camera film magazine got exposed to sunlight, which destroyed the only far UV photos of Earth from the moon. Classic. And finally, Apollo 17. Yet again, the telemetry data disappeared, and when they finally figured out what happened to it, yet again, it got recorded over in the 80s. This is also the mission where we get this famous blue marble photo of Earth. This photo, once they get back and they're analyzing it, it has a serial number on it that jumps completely out of sequence from the other photos, which leads to a whole lot of speculation about the origin of this photo, as well as its authenticity. For being 7 extremely important missions, extremely important moments of human and American history, they were extremely careless with all of this valuable data. And I don't really understand why, unless they didn't want people to see this data. It would seem irrefutable that we landed on the moon, having left multiple different scientific instruments behind, collecting 842 pounds of moon rock samples throughout the course of the 7 different missions, having video, photo evidence, having 12 different astronauts all attesting that they did in fact fly to the moon, walked on the moon, experienced this entire experience the way that we say it happened. So then why are there so many people who doubt that we actually landed on the moon? There is a ton of different theories as to why the moon landings were in fact fake. And there's tons of different proofs and anomalies and all kinds of different stuff that people have pointed to. But I really want to focus on the different proofs and theories that haven't really been refuted, at least not very well, and have a higher likelihood of really showing something serious that it was in fact fake. One of the biggest pieces they used to prove that we did in fact land on the moon is that we brought back 842 pounds of lunar rocks. So how did we get these moon rocks if we never went? Well, there's some pretty good explanations out there. Well, first of all, they've lost over 500 of them, which seems wildly irresponsible. In 1967, Werner von Braun made a trip down to Antarctica, and this is a hotspot for asteroid activity. Apparently there's tons of undiscovered, unclaimed asteroids down here. Though there was no proof that this is exactly what he was doing down there, he was exploring using naval ships. Seemed like he was down there on official business. And this was just 2 years before the first space flight to the moon. So he could have been down there gathering space rocks, moon rocks, all kinds of different space stuff to bring back to then use as their legitimate moon rocks. Then, much like the seatbelt basalt we just talked about, there's another instance where the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, Ambassador William Middendorf, he presented a moon rock to the Dutch Prime Minister William Dries as a private gift during the Apollo 11 Goodwill Tour. Allegedly, this rock was hand-picked by Neil Armstrong on their first mission to the moon, and it was given just as a token of their appreciation, I guess. I don't really know why they gave it to him. In 2009, they would have this rock re-examined by an independent third party, and they would come to the conclusion that this is not a moon rock at all. This is petrified wood.
This is a big old frozen chunk of poopy.
As far as I know, there's no trees on the moon, but I could be wrong. And not quite the same, but along the same lines of moon rocks, there's also this infamous picture of this rock, and somebody zoomed in and found out that there's a giant letter C on it. C as in like, this is moon rock prop letter C. We've got moon rock prop letter E over here. We've got the Genesis rock, moon rock prop G right here. So people say that this is possibly just stage stuff that's been labeled. But why would they think that this was like a stage movie TV set or something? Oh, well, I'll tell you why. Because in 1968, the Stanley Kubrick film 2001, A Space Odyssey, was officially released. This film literally looks like it could have been made last year. The effects, I don't want to say CGI because it's obviously not CGI, but it is unreal, especially when you consider it came from 1968. But when you look at a lot of the shots in this film, a lot of the, I don't know, just the phenomenal ways that Stanley Kubrick was able to artificially create these worlds, it's insane. But you could very much imagine he'd be extremely capable of directing a moon landing.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
But with Kennedy's timeline nearing the end of the 60s, he said we'd be on the moon within this decade. Seeing this film come out, it sparked a whole new idea. The CIA approached Stanley Kubrick and asked if he'd be willing to direct this film. And by asked, I mean they probably found a way to force him into doing it, threatening his family, or who knows. Just based on what I know from watching the movie Eyes Wide Shut, which Stanley Kubrick died during the filming of that from a heart attack, I would be really inclined to think that he was pressured in some way into doing this, which is why that movie was so outspoken against this elite Illuminati. They allegedly filmed this whole, hoax at the MGM studios in London. He had a skeleton crew, and he was working with tons of members of the CIA. But it doesn't stop there. Stanley Kubrick also directed the original Shining with Jack Nicholson.
Here's Johnny!
And there's some weird Easter eggs in that movie. For starters, this Apollo 11 sweater, which is badass. I want one of those. Then we see this little kid, Danny, playing with some toys on this hotel carpet, and the patterns of the carpet look very similar to Launch Pad 39A that Apollo 11 launched from. Even weirder, the number 39000 is on one of the boxes in one of the scenes. They also have tons and tons of shelves of Tang, and as a lot of you guys may remember if you were alive during this time, Tang was the drink of the astronauts.
Wake up!
Wake up your day, there's a great new tank coming your way. Wake up your day, the astronaut's way. Wake up to the great new taste of Tang.
New Tang breakfast beverage crystals, now improved with a fresher orange taste, plus a full day's vitamin C. No wonder New Tang was selected for the space shuttle.
Wake up your day, a fresh new way to the great new taste of Tang.
Improved with fresher orange taste.
And Stanley Kubrick was definitely a perfectionist, and he definitely put a lot of metaphor in his movies. It's very interesting that in the book The Shining, the room number that was like the scary room was 217, but in the film, Stanley changed it to the number 237. And that's interesting because the moon is 237,000 miles away. This kid Danny, with his Apollo 11 sweater, goes into room 237, and when he comes out of 237, his shirt is all ripped up, he's all mangled, his neck is scratched, and he can't speak. Talk about a metaphor. Kubrick went into room 237, faked the moon landing, and then was unable to speak about it and felt completely destroyed and ravaged after he had done this. And this one's just downright weird, and if you look at it closely, it almost seems like there's nothing else it could mean. I don't know what these things are, but they definitely look like rockets. And one of the rockets of the 7, it like has an issue or exploded and makes a return trip all the way around the other rockets, like Apollo 13. Weird, right? And then fast forward to the movie Eyes Wide Shut. That movie is entirely about exposing this elite trafficking sex cult. And if he was starting to come out talking about secrets like that, secrets he might have been hip to, being in the movie Hollywood industry his entire life, then what's stopping them from thinking that he might expose other secrets too? Which is why in 1999 he had a heart attack. If in fact the moon landing was filmed in a studio here on Earth, then there's nobody else on the planet that would be able to pull it off like Kubrick. So he would be the guy. People believe that it had to be made in a studio because for 1969, the cameras and the video footage that we got from the landing of the moon from 250,000 miles away is insane. There's no way that it would be that clear. There's no way it would be that, I don't know. There's just no way. Especially considering the amount of radiation out in space, the fact that the temperature varies from 250 plus to 250 negative on the moon. It's just insane to think that film would last at all. They claim that these Hasselblad cameras had some sort of special insulation to keep it protected from the radiation, but there's some videos that this guy tests the cameras and shows that they actually aren't special in any way. They're just regular cameras. And this film that's in the cameras would have easily been destroyed. There's no way it wouldn't have been.
100% impossible. With the camera that I actually held, the decommissioned moon camera that I held in my hands, absolutely could not have delivered those images, and we'll go into that now. The first thing about this camera that I notice is it's a remarkably similar to the off-the-shelf 500 ELM camera. What made this camera slightly different is that they pulled all the leather, the cosmetic leather off it. So it was, from what I could tell, it was a bare metal camera. Changing film magazines in the middle of a lunar walk doesn't make sense to me, not with, the big gloves and whatnot. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is how come this isn't weather sealed? How come there's all these like holes and crevices, like right here in the dark slide, micro dust can get inside there, go between the film plectrum and the lens, dust up the lens, and really screw things up. So I didn't know how that worked. The other thing too is when I saw the actual camera, and I've seen it a number of times at the Smithsonian, at Photokina, is when you look at it, there's a number of things that absolutely do not make sense if you are a knowledgeable professional photographer who has shot with Hasselblads. But the other thing that was really kind of interesting was the remove dark slide. Now the remove dark slide warning here, it says remove dark slide before installing the magazine. Now if you are in fact a Hasselblad photographer, you'll know that the dark slide has to be in when you take off or remove the film magazine from the camera. And the reason that's the case is because the dark slide protects the film from being exposed, because that's film, right? It's sensitive to light. So this thing here about remove dark slide before installing magazine, that was really strange. You know, when you are a professional at anything and someone hands you a piece of equipment that is weird, you're going to say this is weird. That doesn't make sense. But also what really doesn't make sense, and I'm going to ask you this, just common sense here. If NASA publishes that in direct sunlight, the temperature on the surface of the moon reaches a boiling 250 degrees Fahrenheit, while nighttime temperatures, in other words, when they're on the dark side of the moon, go down to minus 208 degrees Fahrenheit. If you've left film in a glove compartment on a hot day, you'll expose the film. Okay, so not only will you expose the film, but the film can decrystallize and melt. And this source right here is NASA itself. Okay, so NASA is telling you that the temperature on the surface of the moon is a boiling hot 250 degrees. With that, we're going to take a non-insulated camera and walk around on the moon, and it's not weather protected for dust, which would completely ruin the camera. The other problem is that's a motorized camera, which had nickel-cadmium batteries. We didn't have lithium-ion batteries then. We had NiCads. And the thing is, NiCads can safely reach 40 degrees Celsius without damage, which is about 100 and maybe 100 degrees. Okay, any more than that, then it can explode. Those of you who are really skeptics, I want you to take a battery, a NiCad battery, maybe lithium-ion. They're better for heat, but put it in boiling water and you tell me if it explodes. Let me know how that goes. I didn't say I questioned that we've ever been to the moon. I'm just saying that those photographs did not come from the moon. They absolutely did not come from the moon. And if they didn't come from the moon, then where did they come from?
There's also tons of different weird anomalies with all the film from each of the Apollo missions, which is kind of strange. Then, like I mentioned, the camera filming the ascent, as well as the first steps on the moon from Neil Armstrong, they disappeared for like 40 years, turning up at some auction in Sydney. That's really strange. And one thing I found personally interesting that I haven't seen many people talk about was just how good the cameras were that were filming the launch of Apollo 11. I mean, they followed that rocket for a long time with crystal clear accuracy. And I was looking into what these actual cameras were, and they had these special space cameras that were set up miles away at some other space station, and they were capable of filming at 500 frames per second at extremely long distances, super zoomed in. Okay. We weren't even able to do 30 frames per second until mid-2000s. Like, I don't understand how they had these kinds of capabilities, and yet it took us so long for commercial film and commercial, videography to catch up with where NASA was in 1969. But wait, NASA did admit that the Apollo 11 launch footage was actually recycled footage from the Apollo 4 mission. And this isn't conjecture or speculation. This is something they've openly admitted.
In fact, the now iconic separation footage seen here was from cameras mounted in the base of the second stage, and is often shown as part of Apollo 11 footage, but is actually from Apollo 4. These cameras weren't used on Apollo 11 due to lack of space available.
Even if they were willing to substitute that minimal amount of footage and the rest of it was real, that's still enough for you to raise questions about the validity of the entire program. Why lie if you don't have to? One of the biggest proofs for us not being able to make it to the moon is that we wouldn't have been able to get through the Van Allen belts without all of our astronauts just passing away instantly. The radiation is so high, and the space shuttle is only made out of aluminum. It's got a honeycomb, really lightweight frame with another piece of aluminum, which, after talking with AI, apparently that won't protect you from radiation at all, but instead amplifies the radiation from the mixture of the aluminum, the radiation, and any sort of reactions that are happening inside of the spaceship. And then these 11-layer spacesuits, yet again, the only protection from radiation is a thin layer of aluminum, which doesn't protect you from gamma rays or the other types of rays. So you're getting microwaved all the way through these Van Allen belts. According to NASA, they found the trajectory that avoided the worst parts of the Van Allen belts. But if you look at these images, it looks like they go right through the heart of the Van Allen belts because it's strongest at the equator. The equator is actually like closer to where they would have been in Florida. It just makes no sense.
The other thing too is X-rays. X-rays occur on the moon. Do you remember film? And you would have to put it through the TSA machine, but a lot of people would want to take the film out so it wouldn't get exposed in X-rays. Do you remember that? Or are we so far into digital now? Those of you who do remember that we took our film out. We took it out because we didn't want to get it exposed to X-rays. Unfortunately, there's a lot of X-rays on the moon. How much X-rays are on the moon? They don't even know if an astronaut can survive it. It says lunar astronauts could be harmed by X-ray outbursts from the sun. And it's an X-ray danger. That's really weird because we've had like 8 manned landings on the moon. I don't know how many astronauts have actually been on it, maybe 12, 16 or something like that. But we now know in January of 2007 that moon astronauts may face X-ray danger. Well, if they may face X-ray danger, then the film definitely face X-ray danger. NASA has just announced that they're sending mannequins, 2 mannequins to the moon. Helga and Zohar are these artificial crash test dummy female robots that were conducted with NASA, the creator of the Special Protection Vest. This is considered the largest experiment made for studying radiation exposure related to astronauts outside low Earth orbit. So, we are trying to find out if people can live and survive on a moon landing 50 years later after we landed on the moon.
Current space programs are saying that the main reason they can't figure out how to get to space is because they're still having trouble figuring out how to get through the Van Allen belts. This is 2025 space explorers that are still trying to navigate something that we've already figured out. We already solved this problem in 1969. So why can't we solve it now? In fact, astronaut and chemical engineer Don Petit, I don't know. He says straight up that the reason we can't figure this out is because NASA destroyed all of the documents, all of the blueprints, all of everything from the Apollo programs. So we have none of that technology or information now.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
Why would they do that? That literally makes no sense. I mentioned this earlier, but Elon Musk and multiple other people from the Artemis program say that in order to get from here to the moon, we would have to refill the space shuttles like 8 to 20 times in order to make it there on the fuel reserves that are allowed in the ship. So how did they do it in 1969 without refueling once? Then there's the Earth pictures. This one is wild. I found this video that shows a bunch of these Earth pictures where we're seeing Earth from the moon or from outer space. And when you increase the exposure and the gamma on these photos, you can very clearly see the place that it was cropped in. You can see the layer of the Earth being stamped into this image. It's fake. But more specifically with the Apollo 11 mission, the 3 men there were getting photos or I guess images of the Earth allegedly from halfway between the Earth and their destination being the moon, claiming that they're at 130,000 miles away. And they say that they put their camera right up to the glass so that all we're seeing is this little tiny Earth ball from 130,000 miles away. If this was pushed right up against the glass, then why are we able to see an arm or something like go in the way of the camera? And then if we look closely, it kind of looks like there's just a massive Earth, but we're only seeing a little circular portion of it because they're filming from a little ways away in a dark room, and all you can see is that little circular Earth shape. But it looks like a little Earth. out in the middle of the darkness. A little bit of, I don't know, magic, illusion, trickery. And on top of that, there's this weird clip where they're talking back to the command center, and they know that there's supposed to be like a 4-second delay between them receiving messages and then resending them. And they receive this message, 4 seconds goes by, then you hear this voice say, talk.
11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great, over. Okay, Roger,
It's as if they're faking the fact that there's a 4-second delay. They're faking the fact that they're 130,000 miles away from Earth right now. And then you look at these weird Earth photos or like video of the Earth that they're trying to show you. Something's weird. Something's up. And the last one, for me, probably the biggest one, is the numerous slip-ups by Buzz Aldrin saying we did not, in fact, go to the moon.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen. So in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going. Money is a good thing.
Home.
If there's something very important to be developed from the moon, I'm not sure what it is right now. And I sure think we should identify what it is for America to make such gross expenditures again for human habitation on the moon. We can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there. I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, they're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us.
You're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
This is when I had a sit-down interview with him, and I showed him the footage which he helped photograph. The fake footage of being halfway to the moon. He says, how did you get this? I'm going to become a famous person for having discovered this. What an ego I must have. So how could I become famous if I'm wrong? And then he says that he was just a passenger, that him and Neil Armstrong were only passengers. I need to talk to the administrator of NASA. Well, I thought they were pilots piloting the vehicle. So all he did was orbit for 8 days. That's why he was a passenger. So he basically admitted twice that I was correct. And when he realized that, he threatened to sue me if I showed those remarks to anybody.
If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
At the time, you feel very much, or I did feel very much on stage, 240,000 miles away. Millions of people are watching on television, listening to your voice. In a word, apprehensive of not doing something wrong or what's expected of you.
And yet, Buzz, it almost destroyed you.
Right.
We've also got Bart Sibrel, who's accosting all of these astronauts, asking them to put their hand on a Bible and swear that they went to the moon. And none of them do it. In fact, Buzz Aldrin actually punches him right in the face. If I went to the moon and some crazy conspiracy guy came up and said, put your hand on the Bible and swear that you went to the moon, I'd be like, okay, I went to the moon. I swear to God on my mother's life, on my kid's life, blah, 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 that I went to the moon. Now, please leave me alone. Why are you a psycho? But no, these guys avoid it at all costs.
You want me to knock you in the head?
Well, I want you to swear to God on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Okay.
If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you if you don't leave me alone.
So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Seibel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
And get the hell out of the black house.
Okay. Well, take your stuff and get the fuck out. Why don't you quote me and say it's bullshit?
The shadows in the wrong place. I don't give a damn about all that shit.
This is full of shit.
Of lunar orbit being falsified.
Being falsified?
Correct. We got an unedited tape from a source at the Johnson Space Center.
Yes. Totally nonsense. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
But as I was digging into this story, you guys, it didn't stop there. In fact, there's actually theories that we aren't even orbiting in the International Space Station, at least not with humans. It might be floating around in the sky, but there are not humans inside of it. And there's tons of different evidence to prove this might be true. Similarly, the Stratos jump, the guy that jumped from lower Earth orbit, I'm not even sure, it was like 50,000 miles above the Earth. If you look at this picture, the name Zenith is slightly off compared to this picture of the same dude doing the same jump. But I've got to say, the space station stuff is extremely weird. There's videos of people who are clearly being held up on cables with harnesses. You can very clearly see the places where these cables are connecting or like lifting up their clothes. We've even got this video where this guy is flipping and he gets kind of stuck and caught, and the guy next to him yanks him back over by his cable. What the H is going on here? Then they show us these demonstrations of the ISS, like stationary demonstrations of them showing us the weightlessness. And they always just kind of seem awkward in this one little space. They do basic flips, they do weird little tricks, but they never really do anything crazy. If they do anything wild like that, it's only during 60-second clips, and they say that's because they're actually in an airplane and they're doing those weightlessness maneuvers where they fly up and then they nosedive, and during that like 60-second nosedive, you experience weightlessness. And there's lots of videos that show that they're not only weightless, but it seems like they're weightless and moving to where their body is like being pushed around uncontrollably, like an airplane as opposed to an International Space Station flowing constantly around Earth's orbit. Also, what's with this chick's hair standing straight up all the time? Zero gravity doesn't mean that your hair just stands straight up. Like it'll bounce and like float around because there's no gravity. It's not pulling it down. There's nothing pushing it up. Why is this chick's hair straight up in the air? And this chick's hair straight up in the air? It makes no sense. Your hair would kind of flow around like you were in water, but it's not. There's also tons of weird CGI glitches and data moshes of the footage of the International Space Station, as well as the people inside of it.
Well, this bit is when it changes to the real. Notice how the bottom of the microphone changes. The fat square is the CGI. The skinny square is the rectangle. Is when it changes to the real. Also here, same file. Notice it's quite a lot.
But the weirdest thing, by far, to me anyways, was the International Space Station commander ceremonies, where they hand over the torch and control of the command center to the next person in charge. It's always this weird ceremony. It's always the same ceremony. They always have their one hand over the other hand, kind of like this. It's really weird. This video that I was watching pointed out that these are all Freemason rituals. These are all really, really high up 33-degree Freemasons, and this might be a part of becoming a higher member of this cult. You have to go through the process of working on the International Space Station, or they use these people who they can trust on the inside of the Freemason cult. And these are the people that are acting and spreading these lies about the International Space Station and all of these lies that we've been covering up for years.
And it's been great flying with you. It's been great working with you. I am ready to accept command.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Kevin. With great humility and pleasure, I accept command of the International Space Station. Thank you, sir.
There you go. Good luck. And so I'd like to hand over the command of the International Space Station to Maxim Sarayev.
I pass command of the International Space Station to Pavel Vladimirovich Vinogradov. Congratulations.
And I would like to transfer the command of this beautiful home, my space home, to my friend, the new space station commander, Fyodor Yurchikin. Thank you very much, Pavel.
Спасибо, дружище. Dedicated ground support staff at all of the mission control center. So, Gennady, it's your time to be commander. How you say it? That's it.
And then the most convincing piece that I saw is these space bubbles.
So many times during spacewalks outside the International Space Station, we can see air bubbles rising up. Can you touch on how there are air bubbles in space?
Can you be more specific? Air bubbles?
So yeah, like a lot of times during the footage, the NASA footage, you can see bubbles coming up out of the helmets or kind of from underneath you. How do you explain bubbles in space?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. Now sometimes you get water in the helmet, and it's either from sweat or from the cooling garments. And in some of my spacewalks, I had like water in the helmet, not like I was going to drown in the helmet, but just little bits of water probably came from sweat. Often on the outside of the space station, you'll liberate little pieces of, it's a really harsh environment out there, and the outside of the space station gets beat up pretty good. And sometimes, you'll see just little flecks of paint or something that you might have disrupted floating away from the suit. And, that's generally what that is. I've never seen any kind of air bubble anywhere.
Yeah. Could it be that you're filming in an underwater pool and you're not really out there? All right, well, I just encourage everyone to look up Bubbles in Space, hashtag Bubbles in Space. Thank you very much. Thank you.
He spent $45 to say that.
I got him free.
In the vacuum of space, it's not water, so you're not going to see bubbles like you do in water. But as it turns out, there is a full replica of the International Space Station, fully submerged in a giant pool, and that's what they use to train all of these astronauts on how to do these spacewalks and work on the ISS and fix all these numerous problems that they seem to have every single day. And for whatever reason, all of these components were built on the outside instead of the inside of the station, which makes no sense. And allegedly, the ISS was built piece by piece up in space, but there's no vacuum compartments between any one of the pieces or parts. So if there's any giant leak in one piece, the whole space station is screwed. This is probably the number one thing cited, though, when it comes to the moon landing, is there is no stars in any video from any Apollo mission anywhere ever. And none of the astronauts ever talk about stars unless prompted by the press or people asking them about it. Why do we think there's no stars? Probably because if they didn't do it perfectly accurate to all of the constellations in the sky, or if certain constellations showed where they shouldn't, boom, easily debunked. So they just assumed it'd be easier to remove the stars, give them a black background, and say that because of the extreme brightness of the moon reflecting off of its surface, there's no way for us to see the stars. Could be an explanation, or they could have removed the stars from the entire thing so that we couldn't figure it out. And when this command module finally enters back into Earth's atmosphere, it is barreling back down to the surface of the Earth at extremely high speeds. Going that fast, it is going to be a red-hot piece of metal that eventually lands in 50-degree ocean water. There should be massive amounts of steam coming up after that thing hits the water. Steam which we do not see.
While I was on a radio show concerning Apollo, an airline pilot called me and he said, "Bill, I think you're right, because while I was traveling from San Francisco to Tokyo, we saw a C-5A drop a capsule out of its cargo hold. The three orange parachutes opened, and it descended toward the ocean. And even though we were traveling at about 550 knots, we followed this descent as long as we could. When the command capsule returns to Earth, the atmosphere causes it to become red hot due to friction at high speed. Well, when a command capsule strikes an ocean, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, this red-hot capsule should have turned a large volume of seawater into steam instantly, just like when you pour water into a hot pot on the stove, it's called flashing into steam. But in all of the photographs showing the capsule hitting the water, there's no indication whatsoever of any steam, of any indication that the capsule was really red hot.
Then we have the string of whistleblower deaths, just like we always do, and some of them are really, really interesting. Apollo 1 was scheduled to be the very first manned mission. They were going to be going up into lower Earth orbit and then coming back down, just testing some of the new Apollo stuff. The first commander, Gus Grissom, he was very open about how the Apollo program was being rushed and was in no way ready for humans to be on board these flights. In fact, on his flight, he brought a lemon and he put it on the ship, showing that he thought that this ship was a lemon. And then, interestingly enough, upon launch of the rocket, the entire cabin where he was sitting catches fire, and unfortunately, he passes away. Both his son, who's a NASA engineer, and his wife are very, very open and serious about the claims that NASA took him out. Then we've got a guy named Thomas Barron. He was a quality control inspector at Kennedy Space Center. He got fired in 1967 for irresponsibility, whatever that means. In response to this, he wrote up a 55-page report on all of the numerous flaws of the Apollo program. And then get this. Just 6 weeks later, on March 7th in 1967, him, his wife, and stepdaughter all died instantly when their Ford stalled out on some train tracks. And this last one was really interesting, just particularly to me, because it's about a guy named James Irwin. He was on the Apollo 15 mission, and he was a part of finding the Genesis rock. But James Irwin has like a charter school where I'm from. And I thought that that was really interesting because I've never thought at all about him or who that guy is. But James Irwin, he had some religious awakening after leaving NASA and retiring and all that. And he eventually got to the point where he was ready to come clean because he was told, like, you can't take these lies to the grave. You got to come clean and repent. So he calls up Bill Casing, which is like one of the OGs in the moon landing hoax community. And he says, hey man, I know you just wrote this book about how the moon landing was a hoax. I was hoping that we could talk, but the phones might be tapped. So it'd be cool if you could call me on Friday at my home in Colorado Springs, which is where James Irwin Charter Academy is. So Bill calls him on like that Friday. James Irwin had a heart attack and died. Convenient timing.
In August of 1991, James Irwin called me at my home. And he said, I understand you've written a book called We Never Went to the Moon. He says, come to think of it, this phone could be tapped. He says, I want you to call me at my home on Friday in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I said, okay, Jim, I'll call you. And he gave me his home phone number. Well, when I called him on Friday, James Irwin was dead. He had died of a heart attack.
But this will bring us to the most interesting and wild piece of this entire story. I'm under the firm belief that the Challenger exploded in 1986 as a way for us to say, things are getting too unsafe. We can't put these lives at risk anymore. We need to shut down the moon program. We need to stop going to the moon. This was their way out. And the reason I think that is because 7 astronauts passed away in the Challenger explosion. Right? Wrong. There is 6 of those 7 Challenger astronauts that have been found alive and well today. Some of them have the same name. Some of them have a new name. Some of them claim to be twin siblings. But these are very clearly the same people. Like, they look identical. Why are 6 of the 7 Challenger victims still alive, doing well with successful careers to this day? Now, the 7th, they just think he might have passed away from natural causes. So, I don't know. But 6 of the 7 Challenger victims are still alive.
The same name as this retired professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Are you Michael Smith?
Yeah.
Professor at university?
Retired.
Retired?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just stopped by because there's this room. Are you aware of that? There's a rumor on the internet.
It's not me.
That people are saying.
Yeah, it's not me, obviously. I mean, anybody that looks at my background, looks where I was born, it's not me. I mean, it's interesting that the Michael J. Smith, that was the astronaut, looks something like me when we were younger, but really not, if you really look at facial recognition.
You never been a pilot, never been in the military?
Nothing like that.
Huh.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
And I don't respond to the emails I get. I get probably an email, maybe 2 a month.
Really?
Yeah, and I got one guy that's been really hounding me, and I turned it over to the FBI.
Okay. Yeah, you just sure look a lot. It's the same name.
I know the facial thing, but that's what we looked like. What? 40 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Judy. How you doing? I'm from the press. I just had a quick question, if you don't mind.
What press?
I'm from a radio station in San Bernardino. I know there's a conspiracy about the space shuttle. No, I want to be polite. Friendly. Just a question. So there's a lot of rumors about you being on that space shuttle. Obviously, you know, if you want to comment, we would really appreciate it.
Let me say that it's really a pleasure to be back.
If you look at clips of his brother, Claude, now speaking, it's the same exact thing. Every other word is,
But Allison's dream is continued to be carried on.
I think we got some...
we're very fortunate that
I think we're ready to go fly. Thanks for being out here today.
His brother just so happens to be the spokesperson for the Challenger tragedy. Why aren't there any pictures of his brother back when this happened? Why didn't his brother speak at the funeral? Use your head.
That one hit me like a freight train. So this stuff has all had me thinking real deep on all of the space stuff. It's absolutely insane. We currently have SpaceX working on missions to the moon as well as Mars.
So there I was, just minding my own business, looking at Google Earth, and this big snow-covered monstrosity is staring me in the face like, why is that covered in snow? So I keep digging a little bit deeper, and I finally get underneath this cloud cover here, and a few images pop up. And I said, oh, images, what are they? Well, this is what you got, which I'm sure that looks familiar to you, right? Looks just like the pictures they give us of Mars. So I'm just kind of creeping around here and definitely noticing the same kind of undulation changes and same kind of rock, same kind of dirt. Only thing that's missing is that nice little red tint that they pay somebody $150,000 a year to put on there. So I'll keep kind of going through here and see if it... What the... Yeah. So, oh, I got another truck. Oh yeah, it says NASA. What's that say? Mars Project? I think I found out where Mars is, guys.
And I honestly didn't really know what to make of this, but I did stumble across it. A picture of the moon rover looking like it's on the moon, but it's a Google Earth picture. And as far as I know, Google Earth is mainly focused on Earth. But this is super weird. And it's not just the moon. We've actually got another Google Earth image that if you follow this link, it will take you to Mars. And I'll include the link in the description. There should have been a card as well for the link, so you guys can go check it out yourself. But what do you guys make of this? But I'm starting to wonder, have we ever made it to the moon? Have we ever even made it into lower Earth orbit? And I posted a short not too long ago, and most of you guys have probably seen this clip, but it's the commander from the Artemis program, and he actually makes this really weird statement. He even prefaces it with saying, this may not be the right crowd for it. This might get taken the wrong way. I don't know.
I want to bridge. This is going to be an odd answer. It might land wrong, but I'm going to try anyway. This is the first time we're going to send humans to the moon, and we're going to have humans in low Earth orbit. That is awesome. Like, we should, as humanity, we should take a brief moment to go, that's awesome.
So you could take that one of multiple different ways. It could be the first time we are on the moon and simultaneously in lower Earth orbit, or he's saying this is the first time we're going to have somebody on the moon and the first time we're going to have somebody in lower Earth orbit. I just don't know. It just seems like real weird phrasing, especially when he took such a long pause to really think out how he wanted to say it. But I want to know what you guys think. Have we been to the moon? Are we currently orbiting the Earth in lower Earth orbit on the International Space Station? Did Stanley Kubrick make the moon landing? I'll just leave you guys with this. Neil Armstrong didn't really speak much after getting back from his whole moon expedition. He went on to teach at a university. There's really only one major speech that he ever gave, and that was on the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. He says some really interesting stuff talking about peeling back the layers of truth.
There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
So I really appreciate you guys sitting, chilling, hanging out with me for this long. If you guys just can't get enough sobering stories, I'll leave a playlist at the end and some awesome videos you should check out. Definitely go check out the JFK video. It needs more love right now. But yeah, I don't know. I just really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. If you enjoyed the episode, please make sure you hit the like button and please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers ASAP because my ultimate goal is 100 billion subscribers. But no, seriously, you should subscribe. Also, hype this video up. If you don't know what that means, you just swipe left on the comments and then, or is it swipe? Yeah, swipe left on the comments. You hit hype this video and it'll hype it up. And I would really appreciate it. As always, if you want me to cover any specific topics, please drop them in the comments. I go through there. I try to respond to as many as I possibly can. That's where you can do that. But I look forward to doing this again with you guys next week for another one. But until then, sleep safe, stay sober. Cut. All right, everybody cut. Buzz, quit bouncing around. I said cut. Look, that's going to do it for the day, you guys. I don't know. I just want to let you guys know what we're doing is really tough and really proud of each and every one of you. Really grateful to each and every one of you for your hard work. We got one more day of this, and we will make history. But until then, I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Of course, don't say anything to your friends, your family members, pretty much anybody. Or, well, you know. Get some rest, sobers, and we'll see you on Monday, all right?
No, dadgummit. Jack Schmidt having a few problems. Hang on. Yeah. Good show. I told him you were. Whoop. Okay. We see that one went all the way in. Not quite. But there it is, all but about 5 inches. Okay. Boy, do I like to run up here. I feel like Bugs Bunny. You have to eat. I like to skip along. Not me, boy. Skip. Or whatever you call it. I can't get my left leg in front of me. Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Dum-dum-dum-dum. I'll give you a demonstration here, Joe. Roger, right on. Here, Joe. Spectacular demonstration. Nice soft baby landing.
Came out there and swing a leak next to the people.
Uh-oh. Nice soft baby landing. Pretty hard, isn't it? That boat's gonna go. Man, that is hard. Just don't stub your toe. Let me put some more here. I'm gonna get this thing out. No, I got it. Boy, you know, it's all getting down and deal work. Well, you can throw that beauty. When he hits the craters, it starts bouncing. It's when he gets his roots to tail. He makes sharp turns. Hey, you need me, James? Well, I'm going to go over to Point Alpha. Have at it. Hey, Bob, I got my tools of the trade right here. No, dead coming. Jack Schmidt's having a few problems. He's getting about 3 centimeters of wax. Hang on. Yeah. That's beautiful. It's got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you. We'd like to leave immediately. Okay. My golly, the time goes fast. 99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good. X5.
Later, sobers.
Let's go.